Hello again, everyone. This is Zombie Kids Rule, and I'm back with part 3 of the tutorial for how I recreated the Eye of the Beholder character generation process. I apologize if it sounds like I'm a little quiet. You may have to turn up the volume. It's just that I have a hard time finding places to record videos, and so I need to be a little bit quieter. So again, I apologize if it seems like I'm talking very quietly. You'll just have to turn the sound up. Again, I apologize. So this is part 3. If you haven't watched the previous parts and the previous demo videos, you probably should, just so you know what's going on. There are 2 videos that just basically demonstrate what the recreation looks like. So the first longer video shows the Eye of the Beholder original game, and then it shows my recreation. Then there's a shorter video that just highlights some added functionality that I had missed the first time. Then part 1 goes over. Actually, I'll show you in the events what the part 1 and part 2 do. So this part is getting into the actual character class selection, and essentially you're going to see that these events build on each other and they start to look very similar. Okay, so just as a reminder, where we are for this part 3 is going to be a player has selected a portrait, and it now flashes. They choose a race, okay, and now they have the option to choose a class. And the first time you click on something, it changes the color. So it changes the color of what you clicked on to red and changes the previous color to white. And then when you click again, it advances you to the next stage, which is alignment. So that's where we are. We are at this stage where we are getting different lists of classes based on the race that is selected. Okay? So all of these different lists have to be accounted for when you, based on the race that you select. Okay? All right. So we're going to jump right in. The first part tutorial covered the 2 map events that get it kicked off, and then get that flashing box. And part 1 also covered these 4 common events for allowing the player to actually select a portrait box to start creating a character. Part 2 covered the race and gender options, allowing the player to select a race, and then advancing to the classes that are initially shown based on race. So the human classes, elf classes, half-elf classes. So if you watch these, the tutorial for these, you're going to see some similarities of what we're doing for the classes. The logic stays the same. Okay? All right, so let's jump right in with these classes. And the one thing I'll say is the logic is that each one of these has to account for the different races that can pick that class. So every race can pick fighter. So that means this fighter event has to have different pieces of the event to account for if it's a human, if it's an elf, if it's a half elf. So some of these have less, because paladin can only be a human under these rules. So this event, Paladin, is going to be much shorter than the fighter and thief, because all races can be fighters and thieves. All right, so let's walk through the logic, and then I'll make sure that you see every part of these events so that you don't have to, if you want to recreate this, you don't have to do any research with the game, right? So anyway, we'll just go through that. So the first part, again, I'm trying to be better about leaving comments. This common event that changes the text color of the class that the player selects to red. So the first time they click on it, it changes that class to red, changes the text color of the other class choices to white. So again, if I previously clicked Mage and it was red, when I click Fighter, it's going to change Mage to white and it's going to change Fighter to red. Updates the player selection if the same class is selected twice in a row, right? So if you click twice, it's going to move forward in the character generation process, and calls the common event for alignment. So it's going to move forward to alignment. Next comment, check to see if class is already highlighted and is now being selected. That's that part where if you've clicked it twice. Update class variables. So I previously in part 1 I highlighted all the switches and all the variables that I used. So you're going to set the class name string so that you can later display it on the screen for the appropriate character box selected. And then there's going to be conditional branch for each possible race. So as I was saying, comment if human race selected. So this entire part of the common event is if the race selected is human. And then this is if the elf race was selected. And then this is if half-elf, and so on and so forth. So this event is broken into pieces based on which race is being selected. And because of the way this is constructed, only one race switch will be on at any time. So that's one of the reasons why we in the previous race common events, you saw where all the switches are being turned off, and then only the applicable switch is being turned back on again, so that when you get to this stage, there's only one race switch that's on, so only one piece of this event is going to do anything. All right, so first conditional branch for this entire section. If human class switch, right, is on. So if the human class, basically if this is the human race is right, but the switch I used is for human classes, right? So if human class is on, then this is underneath that conditional branch. And the first thing, some of these get, like you can see here, there are 3 conditional branches, all nested, meaning they move in. They're underneath each other. So this is only going to run if this switch is on and this switch is on. Okay? This is only going to run if this switch is on. Okay? And it can get a little confusing about where to put things. So you have to be very careful. What I'm going to show you is this first conditional branch. I can't remember if it has an else, right? I could scroll through and find it, but I can also just go into the browser and say, oh, nope, create else branch is not checked. So that tells me, as it's a quick reminder, that this conditional branch statement doesn't have an else, okay? Now this one is going to have an else. So if fighter is on, oh, well, actually, I'm sorry, this one doesn't. Oh, okay, no, I remember that. It doesn't have an else branch, okay? But you will see some that do. Actually, you'll see one regarding Paladin that does. So this doesn't have an else branch. And these, of course, don't. You can see right here that there's no else underneath this, okay? All right, so if human class is on, if fighter is on, and remember, this should look familiar. This is the same logic that we used for the race. If you have, this is only on if you previously clicked fighter the last time. So this is saying if fighter switches on, meaning that you've clicked it twice in a row now, then do these conditional branches, right? And this should look familiar. If CC box 1 is on, if that switch is on, then update the variables 746, 747, 748, 749. CC1 class is the string fighter, or CC2 class is the string fighter. So all this is doing is setting the value of the variable to a word, a string, so that we can display it later. Okay? And this is only happening right here, fighter's on. This is only happening if it's the second time that the class fighter has been selected. So if that is true, if it's the second time, then it's going to turn fighter type class switch on right here, because fighters, paladins, and rangers, right, and any multi-class that has, for instance, fighter or ranger, those are considered fighter type classes. And so there's a switch specifically for if the class that's being selected is a fighter type class. Then it's turning on a switch for a strength bonus. Again, fighter type classes, if they get an 18 on their strength, then they get an additional strength bonus. It's a roll of 1 to 100. So it's 1801, 1802 up to 18100, which is 00. So it has to turn on this switch, strength bonus is on, because later on it's going to be important to know if we need to display an actual bonus on the screen. Then it's going to call the common event for alignments. So it jumps down here to proceed. And once it does that, it exits the events processing. Because remember from the races, this is basically the part where it says, oh, you already clicked on fighter once, right? Basically, you clicked on fighter last time. Now, since you're clicking on it again, you must want to proceed with that choice. And that's what this is doing. So then it calls alignment and it exits the event. However, right, if you haven't clicked on fighter twice, it's so basically it's the first time you're clicking on it, or it's the maybe you clicked on other things before, but you're coming back to fighter. So then it's going to do this next part. Show all class options except current one being selected as white, and make them selectable again. And then it has to do this consideration, which we saw in the races. If there is already an evil party member, then paladin is not an option. So remember I explained the logic last time. Rather than try to figure out, oh, I clicked mage and that turns red. Now I click cleric. Cleric has to turn red and mage has to turn white, right? You're not clicking on these, actually you're clicking on the screen, the words. But instead of trying to do this thing of, oh, cleric was clicked last time, now I'm clicking something else, I'm going to have conditional branches to change that specific one to white, I said, no, I'm just going to re-show all of the choices. And if it's not being actively selected, they're going to be white. I'm going to re-show the pictures, text as white, and then the one that's being clicked on, I'm going to show as red. It just was so much easier to do. Now, maybe there's an even easier way to do it, but this was the logic that I came up with. It works, so that's what I built. All right, so now we saw this in the races common events. Have to account if evil party member switches on, and this only is applicable for humans because it only affects paladins. So if the evil party member switches on, you have a list of classes that do not include paladin. Else, meaning evil party member switches off, you have a list of classes that includes paladin. Okay? Now, I just want to highlight one more thing. We have not seen any event so far that turns on the evil party member switch, because that's actually happening down here in alignments. So in case you haven't figured this out yet, you can test pieces of your event just by, for instance, if I just click here and I go down to here, there's nothing that's missing. So if I just click this and click test, it's going to just show whatever I highlighted, right? So if I want to test that this is working correctly, right, this whole thing, both the else's and everything, then what I would have to do is I would say, you know what, right here, I'm going to simply turn that switch. Let's see, where is it? That's thief type. Here we go. Evil party member. I'm just going to turn that on for the sake of testing, right? And so now when I click there and then I click here and I test, Paladin is not a choice because it's doing this part down here. And if I test this without that switch being on, then Paladin is going to be a choice. Okay, so I'm only highlighting that because if you're going to recreate this, I do this constantly when I'm making events, right? I want to test pieces as I build it to make sure they're working. So sometimes you have to insert, like, say, the value of a variable, or you have to turn a switch on, just so you can test a part without running a playtest and running the whole thing, right? So I just want to highlight that. We have not seen where this gets turned on yet. It comes later. Okay, so if evil party member switch is on, show this list. If it's off, show another list. So again, just to make it easier for you, this is all under the human class, right? So we're still under that conditional branch for if human class is on. So it shows ranger in white, cleric in white, mage, thief in white. Then it shows the fighter in red because that's what's being selected. And remember, these are making those pictures selectable, okay? And then if it's the else branch, so the evil party member switch is off, then it's going to have paladin, ranger, cleric, mage, thief, right? And then, again, the last picture being shown is fighter. And remember how I highlighted that they're out of order, that I move the one that's being shown in red to the bottom? Okay, and I explained why I did that in a previous video. So that's what it has to do here for the human classes, right? So it checks that. Then it does the last part, which is, remember this section down here is if it's being clicked on once, right? It's not being clicked on twice. So turn fighter type and thief type class switches off. So these are being turned off, right? And then turn off all the class switches and multi-class and multi-class 3 switches. Turn all those off, right? Turn that range of switches off. And then just turn on the fighter switch, right? Just turn on the fighter switch. Because remember, what this is for is it's accommodating if you're clicking. Remember, you're not clicking on these common events, you're clicking on the actual words. But if I clicked on Ranger, then, fighter type class is on, and then Ranger class is on. Well, when I click on Mage, I no longer want fighter type class to be on, and I don't want Ranger switch to be on, right? So I'm just turning everything off and then only turning on the switch for the one that was actively selected, okay? So if I clicked, for instance, if I clicked Fighter Thief, right, one time, then this common event, when I click Fighter Thief, that's going to turn the fighter type class on and the thief type class on. Well, then when I click Cleric, neither one of those is supposed to be on. So it needs to turn all of the switches off and just turn on the one that is applicable. And remember, the final switches, right, the final switches that need to be turned on when you proceed, and so the game remembers them, that's happening up here when you do the second click, right? So I clicked on fighter once, down here, clicked on fighter twice, it runs this, and now it's turning on that fighter type class on, and the strength bonus, right? So the switches that need to be on for later in the process, those are being turned on up here when you're moving forward. Okay. All right. So that's what this is doing. Now, what you're going to find is that for all the other races, these are very, very, very similar, right? Very similar. So comment if elf race selected. So you change this conditional branch. If elf class is on. Well, if fighter is on, well, that's the same. All of these are the same, except you have to change. Actually, no, these are all the same because the string is fighter. So actually, this through here, none of that's changing from the one above. Okay. This is the same. You're turning on the fighter type class. This is the same. You're turning on the strength bonus switch, and these are the same. So, if you copied and pasted from the portion above, this is the only switch this is only conditional branch that's changing, elf class. All right. Then down here, this is all, very similar to the human class section, except that you have to just show the classes that are specific to elf now, right? So elves can be rangers, clerics, mages, thieves, fighter mage, fighter thief, fighter mage thief, mage thief. And then these are all being shown in white, right? And then the very last one that's being shown is fighter, because that's what you clicked on, in red. And remember, all the buttons are the button picture plugins are being used to make all of these selectable again. And then this is the same. So you're turning off the fighter type and thief type switches. You're turning off all the class switches, multi-class, multi-class 3, and you're turning that fighter switch on. So these are all the same as the previous human section. Okay? Half-elf. Almost, again, the only thing changing for the half-elf section, right? Remember, this is a new conditional branch, right? So it's half-elf class is on, so you're changing the switch. This conditional branch is the same. All of these are the same. This is the same. This is the same. This is the same. All of that's the same. You get down here, and this is going to change based on the classes that are available to half-elves. So we have ranger, cleric, mage, thief, fighter cleric, fighter mage, fighter thief, fighter cleric mage, fighter mage thief, cleric ranger, cleric mage, and mage thief. And then the last one to be shown is fighter in red, right? So you've already seen this logic. This is the same, this is the same, this is the same. Okay? So really, in these events, the most you have to change is the list of classes available for that particular race. So we get down to dwarf, same thing. If dwarf class is on, so if you copied and pasted, change that switch. This is the same, all of this is the same, all of this is the same, right? All of that is copied and pasted. Then you have to show your classes available for dwarves. Dwarves can be clerics, thief, fighter cleric, fighter thief, and then, of course, the fighter being shown in red. All of this is the same. None of that changed from the previous ones above. Now we're getting down towards the end. Gnome class, so change that switch. All of this is the same. All of this is the same. And then show the classes that gnomes can be. Cleric, thief, fighter cleric, fighter thief, cleric thief. Again, these are all being shown in white, being clickable again. And then the last, the choice that really is on top is fighter, shown in red. All of this is the same. And then finally, halfling. So change this conditional branch to halfling class switch being on. All of this is the same. All of this is the same. And then the classes that are available to the halflings: cleric, thief, fighter thief, and then fighter in red. And then all of this is the same, and that's the event. Okay, so as you can see, this is just a lot of copying and pasting, right? Once you make the human one, for instance, it's a lot of copying and pasting, and then you just have to change your lists of classes that are available for that particular race, right? And then so there's a number of places where this can go wrong. One is that you don't nest your conditional branches properly. That can cause it to go astray. Or you're not careful when you're doing your, making sure that you're using different image numbers, making sure that your button picture events are calling the right image number and the right common event, or you're not paying attention to your Y pixels as to where the words are being shown on the screen, right? So that's, or if when you're copying and pasting, not forgetting to change a switch or something, right? That's where you can go astray. All right, so that's the if they select fighter. Now you're going to see that, for instance, paladin is much shorter, because paladin only has to deal with humans. So all of this is the same, right? I just copied and pasted this. Now this one doesn't have to have a conditional branch for if human is on, because paladins can only be human, so we skip right over that conditional. And it goes right into if paladin is on. So if the paladin class switches on, then this should look familiar, right? It's basically setting the string paladin to the appropriate variables, right? So this should look familiar. This should look familiar. You're turning the fighter type class on. You're turning the strength bonus switch. These are switches, turning them on, calling the common event for alignment. So this is essentially a copy and paste from the previous event, but you're changing this to paladin instead of fighter, and you're changing the string to paladin, right? And then this is the same. And then here, you can actually copy and paste this from the human section under fighter. You just have to make sure that fighter shows in white, right, at the top of the list, and then paladin shows in red, right? That's all you have to do. So you just have to move a couple of event commands. But all the rest of this is the same as it was before under fighter for humans. So they can be fighter, ranger, cleric, mage, thief, and then paladin in red. And then this is that script which we've already seen that is making all of these images clickable again. And then this is actually the same from all of the fighter ones. You're turning off the fighter type and thief type switches. You're turning off all of the class switches, multi-class 3, and you're turning on the appropriate switch, which is paladin. And then that's the end of the event. Okay? So Ranger. Ranger, again, is longer because more races can be Rangers. So this stays the same. We're back to having to have, is it a human? Is it an elf? Is it a half-elf, right? So we're back to that, a conditional branch. And then this is what we saw like under Paladin, right? Where it's if the Ranger switches on. And then these are basically all the same as previous ones, except you're changing the string to Ranger. And then this is the same. You're turning on the fighter type class. You're turning on the strength bonus. You're calling the common event for alignments. And then this portion, again, since it's a human, right, we're under the human classes. You have to accommodate for if it's an evil party member. So you can literally copy and paste this from that you previously used in one of the other ones, right? So you can just copy and paste it, and this is accounting for one list does not include a paladin, and the else branch does include it, right? So again, copy and paste: fighter, cleric, mage, thief, and then ranger in red, making all of them clickable. else include the paladin, right? It's the same list, but it includes paladin. And then these are all the same as being used previously, except that you're turning the ranger switch on. Okay? And then, just like under fighter, you have to go through each race that can be a ranger. So if elf class is on, and then if ranger is on, change, this is exactly the same, right? This is exactly the same as it was under human. These are all the same, like they were under human above. And then, of course, just like we've seen before, you have to show the classes that elves can be, because we're under elf, so you can copy and paste this list from the elf list under fighter. Okay, and just make sure that everything is showing where it's supposed to be, and that you are making the ranger red, because that's what we're clicking on, right? So I'm not going to read through these lists every single time, because if you're trying to recreate this, you really should just, take a piece of paper and write these down, so that you can, then reference it, right? So I'm not going to read through the class options each time. So this is all the same as it was above, right? Above in the previous part of the event. So then we get to half-elf. Exact same thing. If half-elf class is on, and then if ranger is on, and then this is all the same as it was in the previous sections above. This is all the same. This can be copied and pasted from the half-elf list under fighter, right? And you just have to make sure that you're making the ranger option in color. All of this is the same as it was for the humans and the elves. And then that's it, because the other races can't be rangers. Okay? All of the rest of these are the exact same logic. So cleric, you have to go through all the races. If human class is on, if cleric is on, change the string to cleric. Now, you'll notice here that we're not turning on that fighter type switch, because clerics are not fighter types. So if we were copying and pasting from one of these, we would have to make sure that we deleted that switch being turned on, because cleric is not a fighter type class. But and then you notice that the STR bonus is being turned off here, right? Because there's no other place that this gets turned off. So if I had clicked on fighter the first time, then oh, I'm sorry. So let me just explain why this is like this. When you advance to alignment, right, you can go backwards. So let's say I clicked fighter, and I clicked it twice, so it advances to alignment. And then I click the back button. Well, when I click the back button, and then I decide to click something else, like say cleric, well, a cleric doesn't have a strength bonus, right? And so I had two choices. When I click the back button, I either turn off all the necessary switches, for the step that you're moving backwards to, and run the risk of forgetting something, or it not always being applicable or something, or just doing it in the events themselves where you're selecting the class, for instance. So I just chose to finalize everything in the portion of the event where you're saying, okay, I'm going to set the string, and I'm going to make sure the appropriate switches are either on or off. That's just a design choice that I made. So this is turning this off. It might not even be on, right? I might have picked mage the first time, moved to alignment, and then went backwards. Well, this bonus switch won't even be on, but I don't know that, right? So I'm just covering the bases for if this bonus switch was on, right, based on previous choices. It's being turned off now because it's not applicable to clerics. That's the logic that I used. And these are the same. you're calling the alignments. This is exactly a copy and paste from the previous common events. If evil party member switches on, and you have to have your list of choices that do not include paladin, and then under the else, the list of choices that includes paladin, right? Remember that you're always making the class of the common event that you're calling red. These are all the same, except that you're turning the cleric switch on, right? So turn off the fighter type, turn off the thief type, turn off all the switches, classes, multi-classes, turn cleric on. Elf is going to be a repeat, right, of both the above and the well, it's going to be a repeat of the above partially, and then it's going to be a repeat of the list of classes that elves can be. So if elf class is on, and then this is the same as it was under human, this is the same as it was under human, this is the same as it was under elf for like under fighter or ranger, for instance. So it's the same list. You can copy and paste it. You just have to make sure that you're turning cleric red, right, instead of, say, ranger or fighter. All of this is the same as it was above under human. And then half elf, same thing. Change your conditional branches half elf classes on. All of this is the same as it was above for human and elves. This is the same. This list you can take from, the half-elf list under fighter or the half-elf list under ranger. So you can take that list from up there, and then all of this is the same as it was in the previous parts of this event. Same thing with dwarves, right? Dwarves can be clerics, so if dwarf class is on, all of this is the same as it was before. All of this is the same as it was before. All of this can be copied and pasted from the fighter, for instance, because dwarfs, can be fighters, so you could copy the list from there. Just make sure you're changing the right word to red. All of this is the same as it was above. Gnome, right? So gnomes, same exact concept. If gnome class is on, all of this is the same. All of this is the same. Take the gnome list from fighter, right? All of this is the same. And then halfling, right? So all of these folks can be clerics, right? So if halfling class is on, all of this is the same as it was in the previous sections. All of this is the same. You can take this list from the halfling list under fighter, okay? And then all of this is the same. So that wraps up cleric. Mage, the single classes are very similar. You're gonna see a little bit of difference when we get to the multi classes. Okay, so all of this is the same as it was in these previous ones. You can copy and paste. You're under mage now. If human class is on, if mage is on, just make the appropriate changes to the string. Again, you're not turning on the fighter type class because mages aren't fighter types. Turning off the strength bonus, right, just in case. Calling your alignments. And then because you're under the human, if evil party member is on, right, you have to show the list that doesn't have paladin as a choice. You have to show the else branch where paladin is a choice. Again, just make sure that you're changing the right word to red, right? And then this was the same as previous common events, except you're turning the mage switch on. Then you do the exact same thing for elf, right? Elf class is on. All this is the same as it was for human. Same for human. This is the list for the elf classes, right? You can copy and paste that from one of the previous ones. All this is the same as it was for human. Same thing for half elf. Okay? So just copying and pasting and making sure that you're changing the color of the switch, the color of the text appropriately, and making sure you're doing your switches. Now, Thief adds one new thing to it. So again, all the races can be thieves. Okay, so just one second. I have to pause this for a second. Just one second. Okay, sorry about that. I got called away for a brief second. So where was I? So the thief class introduces a new something new that wasn't highlighted in the previous ones, but pretty much everything else is the same. All races can be thieves, so this is another one that's pretty lengthy. If you were to copy and paste the fighter event, a lot of your work would already be done for you. So you have if the human class is on, if the thief switch is on, changing your string to thief, right? All of this other stuff stays the same. Now, this is the new thing, because anything that has thief as one of the classes has a thief type class switch that needs to be turned on, and we'll see why later on. But basically, it's being used with the whole alignment restriction thing with paladins. So because we're choosing a thief now, we have to turn this switch on instead of the fighter type class. And of course, we're turning off the strength bonus switch because the thieves they don't get a strength bonus. And then this is the same as the previous events, the previous common events we're calling alignments. The evil party member switch conditional branch, that's all the same as it was for the humans, right, from the previous ones. So that's all the same. And then again, remember, just make sure that you're changing the color of the one that you're on to red. And then down here, again, this is the same as it was in previous common events. You're turning off those two switches, fighter type and thief type, turning off all the other switches, and then just turning on the appropriate class switch. And then the rest of these are the exact same from previous common events and the portion above for human. If elf class is on, and then all of this is the same. If thief is on, the string for thief, this is the same as it was for human. This is the list for elves, right, that you used before. And this is the same as it was for human above. Half-elf, same thing. If the half-elf class switch is on, all of this is the same as it was for human and elf. All that's the same. This is your list that you used for half-elves, right, from one of the previous ones, like, say, fighter. And then, I guess, all this is the same, and then it just keeps going. Dwarf class, right? Dwarf class is on. All that's the same as it was above. Same as above. This is your list of classes for dwarves that you can take from one of these other ones. All that's the same. Same thing for gnome, right? You have to do the gnome option. And again, I'm not going to repeat all these. You can get you can get the class lists from one of the previous ones that listed the gnome classes. All that's the same. And same thing for halfling. If halfling class is on, all that's the same as above, same as above. Your halfling list that you can take from someplace else, this is the same as above. Okay, so now these ones, this is when you get a new concept that we have to account for, and that's the multi-class option. So we'll click on fighter cleric. And again, this is going to be broken up by races that can be fighter clerics. So this is the same. Now, if half-elf class is on, right, we start with half-elves because humans can't be multi-class, okay? And elves can't be fighter clerics, so we jump right in with half-elf. If half-elf class is on, then this is the same concept as the previous classes. If fighter cleric switches on, and then this should look familiar. You're just updating the string to fighter cleric instead, so you can display this on the screen. We're turning the fighter type class on because one of the classes is fighter. We're turning the strength bonus on because it's a fighter, it can have a strength bonus. But now we're turning on another switch, a new switch, multi-class, because this is a multi-class character. And later on, when we're displaying things on the screen, the game, the event has to know, am I displaying just one level, or am I displaying 2 levels, or am I displaying 3 levels, right? Like 1/2, or 2/2, or 1/1/2, right? For the multi-class levels. So that's what this switch is being used for. And then this is the same as the previous ones. The common event alignments is being called exit. It's structured the exact same. And then, of course, this is your list for half-elves, which you can copy and paste from one of the previous ones. You're just making sure that you're showing fighter cleric in red, right? And then all of this is the same as previous common events. You're just turning on the fighter cleric switch. Do the exact same thing for dwarfs. Dwarfs can be fighter clerics. So if dwarf class is on, this is the same as it was for half-elves above. This is the same as it was for half-elves above. This is your dwarf list that you can copy and paste from one of these other events. This is the same, right, as it was for humans above. And then gnomes can be fighter clerics. So you do a conditional branch for if gnome class is on. All of this is the same as it was for humans and dwarfs above, same as above. This is your gnome class list that you can copy and paste. And this is the same. Okay? So the only thing really new introduced here is the multi-class switch, right? That's really the new part that was added. So Fighter Mage is going to be very, very similar to Fighter Cleric, and again, you have to have conditional branch sets for the appropriate races. So humans can't be, elves can, so we start with elf. If elf class is on, if Fighter Mage is on, and then this is the same as previous common events, you're just changing the string. This is the same as it was for Fighter Cleric. You turn the Fighter type class on, because Fighter is one of them. Turn the Strength bonus on, because it's a Fighter. Turn the multi-class switch on, because it's multi-class. And then this is the same. And then here's your class list for elves that you can copy and paste from a previous event. Just make sure you're changing the color, right, of the right class. All of this is the same as the previous common events, except you're changing this to Fighter Mage, right? And then everything's the same for half-elf. If half-elf class is on, all of this is the same as it was above for elf, same as it was for elf. Here's your half-elf class list that you can copy and paste from one of the other ones. Same as it was above for elf. Okay, Fighter Thief, same exact thing. Start with elves. Elves can be Fighter Thieves. If Fighter Thief is on, this is the same as it was before, except you're changing the string to Fighter Thief. Now this one is adds an additional thing from the Fighter Mage and Fighter Cleric, because you're turning on the Fighter type class switch, but you're also turning on the Thief type class switch, because it's Fighter Thief. You're turning on your Strength bonus because it's a Fighter, and you're turning on your multi-class switch, right? And then these are the same. Here's your list of, what are we under, elf? Yeah, elf. So here's your class list for elves that you used in these previous ones. Just make sure you change the right color. And then all of this is the same. You're just making sure you're turning on the Fighter Thief switch. Repeat for half-elf. If half-elf class is on, all of this is the same as it was above for elf. All of this is the same as it was above for elf. Here's your half-elf class list that you copy and paste. All of this is the same as it was above for elf. And then dwarf is the same thing. If dwarf class is on, same as it was above, same as it was above. Here's your dwarf list that you copy and paste, same as it was above. Same thing with gnomes, right? So if gnome class is on, same as it was above, same as it was above. Here's your gnome class list that you copy and paste, same as it was above, and halfling. Okay, so pretty much every race can be a fighter thief, right? Which makes sense because every race can be a fighter and every race can be a thief. So, well, I'm sorry, humans. Humans are the exception. Humans can't be multi-class under these rules. Okay, so all of this is the same, just for halflings. Okay. Now, so the two classes are all very similar. Now, this is the first time we see three classes, so it's going to be a little different. So we start off the same way. Half-elves, right? Half-elves, we start with half-elves. If half-elf class switches on, if fighter, cleric, mage switches on, and then this is the same as it was in previous ones, except you're changing the string, fighter, cleric, mage. Now, this one, we're turning the fighter type class on, but not the thief one. We're turning the strength bonus on. We're doing the multi-class on, but then we're turning another switch on, multi-class 3, MC3, because again, the multi-class switch is being used. We'll see it later on. It's being used in one particular part. And then this one is being used, again, to be able to show that you have 3 levels instead of 2 or instead of 1. And these are also being used when it comes to rolling hit dice, rolling your hit points. Okay, so that's a new switch. And then this is the same as it was before. Then this is just your list of half-elf classes that you can copy and paste from another common event. And this is the same as it was from the other common events, except that you're turning on the fighter, cleric, mage switch. Okay? And then that's it. Half-elves are the only ones that can be fighter, cleric, mages. So fighter, mage, thief is going to be very similar to the fighter, cleric, mage. You start with elves. If elf class is on, if fighter, mage, thief switches on, update the string to the appropriate class. And then you'll notice we have to turn on the fighter type class. We have to turn on the thief type class. We have to turn on the strength bonus. We have to turn the multi-class switch on and the MC3 switch on. So we're turning all of these switches on. Still calling the common event for alignment. Here's our class list for elves that you copy and paste from another common event. This is the same as the previous common events, except the switch is fighter, mage, thief being turned on. And then, as before, half-elves have an option. If half-elf class is on, all of this is the same as it was above. All of this is the same as it was above. Here's your half-elf class list that you copy and paste from another event. And this is the same as it was above. Okay? So the rest of these are pretty much the same. Cleric Ranger, start off with half-elf class. If Cleric Ranger is on, this is copy and paste, but you're updating the string to Cleric Ranger. You have to have the fighter type class on because it's a ranger. Strength bonus is on because it's a ranger and fighter type. Multi-class is on, right? And then this is the same as it was in previous events. Here's my list of, we're under half-elf, so here's my list of half-elf classes that I copy and paste from previous events. Again, just make sure that you're updating the right text to red. And then here, this is the same as the previous events up here, except that the Cleric Ranger switch is on. Okay? Cleric Mage, same exact concepts. If half-elf class is on, if Cleric Mage switch is on, update the string to Cleric Mage. Strength bonus is off, right? So this is not a fighter type, so we're turning the strength bonus off. But multi-class is on because it's a 2-class character. This is the same as it was for previous common events. Here's our, what are we under? Half-elf, I think, or elf? half-elf. So here's our list of half-elf classes that we copy and paste from another event. And then, again, update the right text. And then this is copy and pasted from previous common events. And just make sure you're turning the cleric mage switch on. Okay? So again, however you decide to do this, you can copy an entire event and just modify, or however, copy pieces of it, whatever works best for you. Cleric Thief, same exact concepts. Gnome is the first race that is applicable. So if Gnome class is on, if Cleric Thief switches on, right, change the string to Cleric Thief. Have to turn the Thief type class on. Strength bonus is off because it's not a fighter type. Multi-class switch is on. Call the alignments. Here's our list of Gnome classes that we take from one of the previous ones. And these are all the same as the previous common events. We're just turning the Cleric Thief switch on. And then finally, Mage Thief. Okay, Mage Thief, same concepts as all the previous common events. If Elf class is on, if Mage Thief switches on, right, then change the string to Mage Thief. Make sure the Thief type class is on. Make sure the strength bonus is off. Make sure multi-class is on. And then we call alignments. Here is our, and I keep forgetting already, Elf. So make sure you're copy and pasting your Elf class list from one of the previous events. Again, just make sure you're changing the text of the right selection to red. This is all the same, right? And then make sure that you're turning your Mage Thief switch to on. Okay. Let's see. And then this is, you repeat the same concept for half-elves, right? If half-elf class is on, this is all the same as it was previously above, all the same as it was above. Here's our half-elf class list that we copy and paste from another event, and then all of this is the same as it was in the previous section. Okay, and that's all the classes. So the concepts are very much the same. They're repeated. Okay. I'm not going to get into alignments right now. I'm gonna save that for another video, simply because for part 4, simply because I'm running out of time. I think for being able to record this, in a quiet space. But what I will tell you is that the same logic is going to apply for the alignments, meaning that we have to account for, if it's being clicked once, it's changing the text to red for what you clicked on, and all the other options are being changed to white. If you select it twice in a row, then it triggers, it basically sets the information that it needs to remember, and then moves on to the next step, the next common event. Right? And so the logic that's being used to do these alignments is going to be the same logic that we used for races and the same logic we used for classes. Okay? And it's just a little bit of things being changed. And then with alignments, there's a little bit more conditional branch checks that have to be done, because we have the restrictions for, if there's a paladin in the party, then none of the other party members can be evil. If there's an evil party member, then you can't pick a paladin. Paladins can only be lawful good. Rangers can only be good. And then thieves can be everything except lawful good. So basically there are restrictions that were built into the rules that you have to accommodate for. But other than that, the concepts are the same about how you click once and it turns red, click twice and it moves forward. Okay? And once with part 4, I cover the alignments, then I'll also cover the back button. because once you move past alignments, you can't go back anymore, right? That was just a design choice that Eye of the Beholder made. Once you get past alignment and you go into doing the attributes and things, then you basically have to finish the character. You can't you can't use the back screen from there. All right, well, so that's part 3. I hope this is making sense. I hope this is helpful if you actually want to recreate this, or if you're just looking for mechanics, concepts that you can take and use and build off and do whatever you want to with them. I hope this is helpful. Hopefully later today I'll have time to do part 4 and get through alignments and the back button. But anyway, again, I hope this is helpful. I hope I hope I'm being sufficiently clear in the way I'm explaining this. If I'm not, you can leave a comment and tell me. I'll try to change what I'm doing as I'm moving forward, or I can respond to you and try to clarify and give additional help. Just be very careful if you are going to recreate this. Just pay attention to detail. Make sure you're changing all the necessary variables or the switches, right? You're doing that sort of thing. All right. Well, until I can get another video up, folks, I hope you're having a great new year. Happy gaming, happy game developing. Good luck on your projects. I hope you love RPG Maker or just game developing as much as I do. It's really fun. And again, I hope this is helpful for somebody. And I will see everybody a little bit later. All right. Thank you very much. Bye.